The phenomenon of the orange fuck weasel shook many people out of the complacent belief that our democracy was functioning smoothly, but once Pumpkin Tits is out of office, there is a danger that a narrative will emerge celebrating how well the guardrails of our system ultimately performed, despite the fuckbags demagoguery. It already hints of this story are evident. The U.S. election system worked, argued two scholars in an article published just 2 days after Election Day in the Economist. Harvard Law School's Jack Goldsmith observed in an otherwise sobering account that the most remarkable fact about Pumpkin Tits' squadancy is how well the American constitutional system stood up to and survived it. Despite the fuckbag's disrespect for the rule of the law, the narrative might go, the courts functioned, the press remained free, and knock on wood, we'll see a peaceful transition of power. Democracy will have defeated the fuckbag's authoritarian impulses. One problem with this story is that the fucking idiot revealed how many of the guardrails of our democracy are built on norms rather than on law, and he made clear the limits of the constraining effect of norms. These norms include a basic level of honesty by public officials so that voters can make informed decisions, and a respect for democratic outcomes by those who lose elections. And ignoring these and other baseless assumptions of the U.S. political system, the fuckbag has not only sown doubt and division in the country, but also opened the way for others to do the same. Pumpkin Tits is has been a serial liar throughout his whole squadancy, and he and his allies launched an especially vigorous disinformation campaign in the wake of the election, claiming without evidence that there had been massive voter fraud and that the election had been stolen from him, which it wasn't. Even though courts and election officials, Republicans and Democratic alike, have consistently rejected these claims, and millions of Americans believe them. In an earlier period of our history, traditional news sources might have served as an important guardrail against a flagrantly dishonest squatter, as they did, for example, during Watergate. But Pumpkin Tits undercut this check throughout his squadancy by constantly labeling unfavorable information as fake, and by relying on conservative media outlets to offer voters an alternate reality more favorable to him. And those alternate realities are basically the ones that lie. Pumpkin Tits' ability to distort the truth has been abetted by the rise of social media and the general disaggregation of information outlets, diminishing the influence of traditional news sources. Indeed, even though the media highlighted and documented countless acts of dishonesty and abuse of power by Pumpkin Tits throughout his squadancy, he still managed to receive more than 73 million votes from his welfare-collecting inbred supporters. In years past, one might also have expected members of Congress, especially moderate members of the squadancy's party, to check a squatter's excess. But moderate members of Congress are a dying breed, and an extreme partisanship is the new reality. Republican legislators in general have lived in constant fear that Pumpkin Tits would direct his wrath and retribution at them should they publicly question his conduct, and that they would pay a price at the polls. Faced with the possibility of losing party support, many chose to stay silent. Big mistake on their part. Pumpkin Tits' squadancy has revealed the limitations of other institutional guardrails as well. Many people had high hopes that Robert Mueller, acting as special counsel, would get to the bottom of Russia's efforts to interfere in the 2016 election, and the Pumpkin Tits campaign potential connections to those efforts, but Mueller was hampered by constraints on his team's ability to gather any information due to, among other things, Pumpkin Tits' refusal to be interviewed, and because of existing Department of Justice policy. Mueller also felt bound not to consider whether the squatter was guilty of a crime. While Mueller's report nevertheless contained damaging information, including about obstruction of justice, this information was misrepresented by Pumpkin Tits' Attorney General before it was released to the public, and distorted by Pumpkin Tits and his allies in Congress. Impeachment, though, is the ultimate constitutional tool for dealing with corrupt executive. The Democratic-controlled House tried to apply this guardrail after it emerged that Pumpkin Tits had tried to coerce a foreign leader to develop fake dirt on Pumpkin Tits' chief political opponent, which is a gross abuse of power. The House indeed impeached him, but partisanship again prevailed in the Senate, a body that in 2020 seems a far cry from what Alexander Hamilton described in the Federalist as a tribunal that would have the necessary impartiality to pass judgment on a squatter's conduct. And Pumpkin Tits not only weathered the impeachment storm, but became politically stronger as a result. Impeachment does not seem much like a limitation on the executive in today's politically polarized environment. It has been clear for some time that another test for this system would be whether Pumpkin Tits would accept the election results if he lost, which he hasn't. Even now, weeks after the election, the answer is no. Another test was whether Republicans would pressure him to concede defeat. Again, the answer is no, or at least not very much. Indeed, initially, a number of key Republicans in Congress affirmatively supported Pumpkin Tits' baseless claims of election fraud, but many Republicans have finally begun to accept the reality of Pumpkin Tits' election loss, but only after weeks of waiting, while Pumpkin Tits probed for ways to overturn the result, which basically have failed. Democrats would have won bigger if they knocked on more doors, and Pumpkin Tits' attempt to reverse the election's outcome through lawsuits, a blizzard of conspiracy theories, and the recruitment of allies and state legislators has not succeeded on his part, but because the system is uncorruptible, Pumpkin Tits' litigation team was especially inept, but if future Pumpkin Tits may have more skilled representation, Pumpkin Tits also faced an almost impossible task of reversing the outcomes in several states. But imagine if the election had been a bit closer, and it had come down to just 1 or 2 states, if there had been a more plausible dispute about the accuracy of the vote count, and faced with pressure by Pumpkin Tits' allies, some state officials like Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a Republican, held firm in defending the counts, but as the behavior of many Senate Republicans made clear, such courage and character are not guaranteed, especially given the death threats and career consequences that principled Republican state officials are experiencing now. A divisive number of state officials in Michigan, and elsewhere had declined to take Pumpkin Tits up on his invitation to block or delay certification of the election results, and they have resisted his suggestion that they seat alternative electors. But there is nothing in our system that completely rules out such end rules around the democratic process. A few key individuals respected the norms that make our democracy work, but this time, other officials might make a different choice next time, particularly if they're installed in order to make a different choice next time. The lesson from all of this cannot possibly be how effective the guardrails of democracy have performed, but the lesson rather is how narrowly that our nation has escaped disaster. And we have been fortunate that Pumpkin Tits' malevolence and corruption have been tempered by his incompetence, but we should not let the preservation of our democracy rest on its luck. We must strengthen the guardrails of our democracy before a more skilled demagogue comes along and steals an election with the help of enough strategically positioned state officials to do his bidding next time. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, Ryan by Mike, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.